This is The World This Weekend. Good evening, I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Tonight, the U.S. Secretary of State warns China not to provide weapons to Russia.
We have information that gives us concern that they are considering providing lethal support to Russia.
Also tonight, fear still grips the residents of East Palestine, Ohio, 2 weeks after a train carrying hazardous chemicals derailed in their town.
It's very scary. I mean, we don't feel safe going back.
And animal rescuers across the country say they're being overwhelmed by abandoned pets.
People are dumping cats, dogs all the time, bags of kittens, boxes of kittens and puppies.
That's later, but first. The United States has a warning for China. Weeks after the U.S. shot down a suspected Chinese spy balloon, Secretary of State Antony Blinken says China could soon send weapons to Russia for its war on Ukraine, adding that such an act would carry serious consequences. Blinken's remarks come as the three-day Munich Security Conference comes to a close. Marina von Stackelberg now on the increasing tension between Washington and Beijing and what it all means for Canada.
Mr. Secretary, how did the meeting go?
Outside of a Munich hotel room, United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken asked by a reporter about an informal meeting with his Chinese counterpart. Blinken tells ABC News he warned Wang Yi not to give Russia weapons. Up until now, China has provided Russia with political and diplomatic support.
We have information that gives us concern that they are considering providing lethal support to Russia in the war against Ukraine. And it was important for me to share very clearly with Wang Yi that this would be a serious problem.
Blinken was set to visit Beijing earlier this month, but he canceled the trip after a U.S. fighter jet shot down a balloon floating in North American airspace. Washington says China was using it for surveillance. Just hours before the meeting, Wang had strong words for the U.S. too. Speaking at the security conference, he called the Americans' decision to shoot down the balloon unimaginable and bordering on hysteria. Roland Paris is an international affairs expert in Ottawa and a former advisor to the Prime Minister's office.
The level of tension between China and the United States over the balloon incident shows just how fragile this relationship is and just how easy it is for an incident to escalate tensions quickly.
Veena Najibullah is an international security expert at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver.
It is also critical for the U.S. and for China to manage the relationship and to manage this tension such that it doesn't become an open confrontation or another Cold War.
Najibullah says if China were to provide military aid to Russia, it would be a big turning point.
Because so far, China, while not condemning Russia, has also been extremely careful not to provide that kind of support, not to be in violation of U.S. and Western sanctions, right? So they've been managing this really difficult straddle. And if they were to make the consideration that it's time to provide Russia with this kind of support, it will lead to escalation.
Paris says all of this is a sign Canada needs to start spending more on its own military and foreign service.
We knew it before, but it's even clearer now, is that we are heading into a much more dangerous era in world politics, and Canada won't be immune from this.
Paris says as it stands right now, Canada is not equipped to deal with that uncertain future. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
The U.S. Transportation Secretary says he will call on major railroads to improve safety after the derailment of a train carrying hazardous materials in Ohio earlier this month. Pete Buttigieg says he will also call on Congress to raise the cap on fines against railroads for violating safety regulations. His comments come as frustration continues to boil over in East Palestine. Government officials say there are no signs of contamination in the community. Both FEMA and the Environmental Protection Agency are on the ground. But as Julia Wong reports, that is of little comfort to residents.
Our lives have been completely turned upside down.
The last couple weeks have been a nightmare for Casey Locke and her husband, Nathaniel.
It's very scary. I mean, we don't feel safe going back.
The couple and their 2-month-old baby Luke fled the small town of East Palestine after the derailment, and the toxic chemical inside vinyl chloride was burned.
After a while, my head would start to hurt, or our nose would run and throat would burn.
I don't feel safe going back, not with a 2-month-old. I don't know what effects it will have on his health. It's definitely stressful, definitely anxiety-inducing.
They are not alone in their distress. Deb Blair is an employee at a grocery store in East Palestine.
Everybody is wanting water. They don't want to drink the water. They don't want to give it to their animals.
Norfolk Southern Railway CEO Alan Shaw visited the community for the first time since the derailment. He defended the move to burn off the chemicals.
I think we did what we needed to do in order to prevent an uncontrolled explosion.
He says the company is being proactive, testing private wells. Ohio Governor Mike DeWine says monitoring of municipal water and the air will continue.
We know that the science indicates that this water is safe, the air is safe. But we also know, very understandably, that residents of East Palestine are concerned.
And some are seeking recourse.
It's probably one of the most significant environmental disasters that our country has faced.
Frank Petosa is a partner with Morgan & Morgan, which has filed a class action lawsuit against Norfolk Southern, one of many filed against the railway company. This lawsuit alleges the amount of vinyl chloride released was reckless.
It was over 1 million pounds of vinyl chloride, which is 2.5 times the amount of the largest group of industrial emitters dating back to 2021. And some of that toxic, cancer-causing vinyl chloride gas went into the environment, but it also converted into phosgene gas, which is a banned chemical warfare agent.
Beyond the lawsuit, a long-term study is needed to monitor the soil and drinking water, says Erin Haynes, a professor of environmental health at the University of Kentucky.
These byproducts can be very toxic. They can be, very unique chemicals now that perhaps aren't being currently monitored. What are these chemicals? At what level are these chemicals? And does that level then impact health?
As for the Locks, they, like many other residents, are navigating lots of unknowns.
I keep saying we're stuck in limbo
as they try to figure out what the future holds. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Facebook's parent company Meta has announced it's following Twitter's lead, allowing users to verify their accounts for a monthly fee. Facebook and Instagram users will be able to get a blue badge using government ID. Meta says the subscription service will also include extra protection against impersonation. Meta Verified will roll out in Australia and New Zealand this week before launching in other countries. Preparations are underway for a celebration tomorrow in Bella Coola, BC. It's a homecoming for a totem pole taken from the Newhawk Nation. It spent decades in the Royal BC Museum before beginning its long journey home. Susanna Da Silva is in Bella Coola to cover the celebrations. Susanna, what makes this totem pole so special, and where is it now?
Well, the pole was carved in the mid-1800s. That's around when BC was declared a colony. And it's been in the community now since Thursday when it arrived in a special crate on the back of a truck after a 1,000-kilometer drive. A convoy of more than a dozen cars with Newhawk members accompanied it the whole way and arrived in town honking in celebration. Now the planning is for tomorrow when the crate will be opened and many here will see it for the very first time. Festivities will go all afternoon, culminating with the big unveiling along with a major community feast. Now, the plan is for the totem pole to remain at the school here in the community for the next year and then be relocated more than 100 kilometers away to where the pole was originally located before the community was forced to relocate to Bella Coola.
And getting this pole back home is a long time coming, right? And the Newhawk Nation has been fighting for years. What can you tell us about that?
Well, for a long time, no one knew what happened to the pole, and then it was discovered in the Royal BC Museum. Now, one of the founders of the museum had purchased it for $45 in 1913, but this was not in line with traditions, according to the First Nation, and say it was only done because the community was struggling. The population had gone from around 30,000 to hundreds because of smallpox, forced to flee their original village site, bringing this pole with them to present-day Bella Coola. The government of Canada had banned potlatches and other cultural ceremonies and traditions, so the community considers that it was stolen. Then one of the great-grandsons of the carver and hereditary chief here, Snuxieltua, says he had a dream about the pole and his great-grandfather and knew it had to come back. So in 2019, they visited the museum to ask for its return. The museum promised it would be, but years went by, the Newhawk sued, and finally, last Monday, walls and windows were moved, and it was taken out by crane and placed on that truck to make the journey here.
So how are people feeling about seeing it back home?
Well, there is a feeling of excitement. The Newhawk, like First Nations across the country, have been focusing on reclaiming their culture and traditions that were erased through things like residential schools. And Chief Snook-Sieltwa actually likens museums and the way items were taken to what happened inside residential schools. So this is really a piece of being able to get back what was taken. Of course, mixed with this spirit of joy is also a reminder of all that was lost. There are many other items still in those museums, and they hope that this is just the beginning of getting those things back.
Okay, Susanna De Silva in Bella Coola, BC, thank you.
You're welcome.
A new Democrat MP has a new suggestion for tackling falsehoods about residential schools. Leah Gazan says there's an increasing misrepresentation and rejection of facts about the institutions. She wants Parliament to declare that rhetoric hate speech. Olivia Stefanovic tells us how that's being received.
Dear Dr. Supernant,
ever since the discovery of possible unmarked graves near former residential schools, Métis archaeologist Keisha Supernant has been targeted with letters like this.
And when they're exhumed, they shouldn't even be classified as a burial site, because I can guarantee you the radar is not accurate in what they're finding in these.
Supernant calls those messages residential school denialism, twisting and dismissing facts about the institutions created to assimilate First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children.
I'm already dealing with the emotional toil of spending my time walking over potential graves of children who went missing. And then for that to be called into question makes the work a lot more challenging.
There's a difference between free speech and hate speech.
Winnipeg Centre NDP MP Leah Gazan already got the House of Commons to acknowledge genocide happened at residential schools. Now she wants Parliament to legislate denialism as hate speech.
That kind of speech is violent and re-traumatizes those who attended residential school, who constantly have their experience of genocide left up for debate.
Well, this is totalitarianism.
Frances Widdowson was fired as a professor from Mount Royal University in Calgary, in part for criticizing the finding of about 200 suspected unmarked graves in Kamloops, BC.
But the only way that you are going to determine whether in fact there are burials there is to do excavations on that site.
Widdowson says she's not a residential school denialist, and the MP's move crosses a dangerous line.
I could be misguided and wrong, but the answer to that is not to make what I'm saying illegal.
I'm horrified when you see educated people, academic people, saying they're not going to believe that these children died at these schools until they start pulling bodies out of the ground.
Michelle Good is from the Red Pheasant First Nation in Saskatchewan. She won the 2020 Governor General's Literary Award for her novel, Five Little Indians, based on the residential school experience.
My mother watched her friend Lily hemorrhage to death from tuberculosis at the Onion Lake Residential School. We've known this. And so to have people respond to our lived experience as though it never happened is devastating.
Good says unless that rhetoric is outlawed, the country will never be able to achieve meaningful reconciliation. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
Animal shelters across Canada say they are overwhelmed by unwanted pets. During the pandemic, many Canadians decided to combat lockdown loneliness by adopting animals. But now, as more people return to the office and the cost of everything from pet food to vet bills goes up, many people are surrendering their animals or abandoning them in the wild. Philip Lee Shannock reports.
Stu Johnson carefully baits a cage where he's been leaving food for the last couple of days.
So when he comes back the second, third time, the trap is set. So when he goes in to get the food, the door closes and it's over.
Johnson's prey is not some wild animal. He volunteers with Team Chelsea Lost Pet Search Group and helps trap abandoned pets. He says sadly he's been busier than ever.
People are dumping cats, dogs all the time. Bags of kittens, boxes of kittens and puppies, that sort of thing are being dumped all over the place.
Today he's in Rouge National Urban Park in Toronto, where he's recently trapped 4 dogs. Parks Canada has issued a plea for people to stop abandoning their pets and exotic animals after a 3-fold increase in the park. Alejandra Bruges says there were 18 abandoned pets in its forest in 2022, compared with just 4 2 years ago. She says the animals are at risk and can pose a risk.
Cold, wet, hungry, hypothermic, starving. And so if they manage to survive, they're going to be also competing for food and habitat with our natural species, which include species at risk.
The number of abandoned pets is increasing, and not just in the wild. Mike Mulick is the manager at the Brampton Animal Shelter northwest of Toronto. He says they're at capacity as more and more people surrender their pets.
They're telling us that they either can't afford to take care of the pet anymore, or that the pet's having some sort of behavioral issue that they're not able to manage.
Mulick says it's also taking longer to adopt out the pets already in the shelter.
With people returning to work as well, people seem hesitant to take on new responsibilities with the economy and interest rates rising.
But it may not just be pet owners behind the surge of abandonments. Leon Davis of the British Columbia SPCA says some breeders also took advantage of the pandemic puppy craze.
We're not seeing a lot of people who adopted during the pandemic now surrendering them. We're talking more about people who were trying to provide animals to that market who now have a surplus of animals that they can't sell or adopt.
He recommends contacting your local animal services or animal rescue organization if you're having trouble caring for your pet. Many organizations like the BC SPCA say their shelters are at capacity, so they're cutting their fees to encourage more adoptions. Philip Lishanok, CBC News, Toronto.
In New Zealand, 11 people are confirmed dead as recovery efforts are underway in the aftermath of Cyclone Gabrielle. Authorities say at least 3,000 people are still missing. The storm hit the country's North Island a week ago, causing widespread damage, disrupting supply chains, and leaving at least 28,000 homes without power. Prime Minister Chris Hipkins says it's New Zealand's biggest natural disaster this century. In Damascus, people sift through the rubble of what Syria says is an Israeli missile strike. Syria's military says 5 people have been killed, another 15 are wounded, and several residential buildings damaged. Israel has not commented on the missile strike, but it frequently attacks targets in Syria that it says are Iranian military facilities. The war in Ukraine is a year old tomorrow. It's forced millions from their homes, turned cities into war zones, and citizens into soldiers. Even far removed from the front lines, life is in a constant state of change. Margaret Evans visited a small town to hear how that was playing out in the early days of the war. She recently returned and brings us this story from western Ukraine.
When a soldier's body is brought home in Ukraine, people kneel on the streets as it passes, a small gesture measured against the weight of the sacrifice, but a moving one. Towns in western Ukraine, far from the front, aren't spared the burden of loss. Mothers cry for their children all across this country. This is a funeral in Kopachinci for 23-year-old Ivan Polansky, a soldier with the 45th Brigade Artillery. His brother Dmitro, also a soldier, was given leave to attend the funeral. He was the best person I've ever known, he says. I've never seen such a warrior. Twice decorated for bravery, he adds. Polansky signed up just 3 days after the Russian invasion. Back then, Kopachinci was already determined to be an important part of the war effort, supporting the army and displaced civilians. A year later, the mayor, Bogdan Kalichauvi, says they're no less determined.
I think that we don't have to wait for the future, we have to work towards the future.
With the help of his wife, Maria Tuzik, a Ukrainian-Canadian, they've created a humanitarian hub in one of the side buildings attached to a school.
We have a generator here, a powerful generator. This is the space that people come to. They know that it's warm.
They also want to better integrate the displaced into the community.
There's still a lot of vulnerability in the country. There's still a lot of people that are struggling.
The town has opened its doors to businesses from the east seeking to relocate in the west. It helps Kopachinci too, of course, by creating jobs. This old warehouse is now home to a furniture company from Kharkiv. They've transported high-tech laser equipment across the country after having rescued it from a no-man's land between Ukrainian and Russian troops earlier in the year.
Their business is actually going to be a really important when it's time to rebuild schools and the kindergartens that were destroyed in the east.
We've gone through a lot, says Serhiy Hromov, one of the floor managers. We were hoping the war would end much earlier, he says, but the end is not in sight yet. Realization for Tuzik, too, when her parents sent her a plane ticket to Toronto.
I didn't know how tired and how exhausted I was until I was there, and there was not like everything was happening around me.
She realized, she says, that this war is not a sprint, but a marathon. Margaret Evans, CBC News, Kopachinci.
India's capital, New Delhi, has experienced some colder than usual winter days this year, with temperatures just above 2 degrees. At times, the New Delhi air has been colder than some of the Himalayan hill stations, and the chill was especially hard on people who are homeless in the city. Freelance reporter Ishan Garg has more.
We are at the mercy of the god. That's all I can say.
With just a tarpaulin sheet separating Rehana and her family from the freezing temperature outside, she prays for the cold to subside. She's among the tens of thousands who live on Delhi's streets. She looks after her children while her husband does odd jobs, but they can't afford to buy warm clothes. It's something that Delhi's more wealthy inhabitants would often donate in the past.
People used to give us warm blankets and sweaters, but nobody has donated anything this year. There are so many rich and famous people in Delhi, but no one thinks about us anymore.
The extreme cold this year, driven by local weather patterns and climate change, is making a bad situation much worse. With the Weather Office predicting cold conditions to continue for at least 2 more weeks, Delhi's municipal bodies say they are stepping up. They have announced a new winter action plan. Under it, they are providing accommodation to about 20,000 people, a fraction of the estimated 200,000 who are homeless. Bipin Rai, a member of the Delhi Urban Shelter Improvement Board, claims thousands more could be accommodated if the demand arose.
Every life is precious to us. We have the resources to provide shelters to thousands more, but the reality is that many don't want to leave the pavement that they've called their home for years. Some are drug users and alcohol addicts. They won't come to the shelters because they'll then lose that freedom to consume those substances.
Critics claim that authorities are looking at the problem superficially. They argue not enough is being done to tackle the root causes of homelessness, with many unable to find work because of their caste, religion or ethnicity. Many, like this homeless man, say they are trapped in a vicious cycle of poverty.
I was incarcerated for many years, so now I'm unable to find work. If I could find work, I wouldn't be living here like this. I appreciate that the government has set up these homeless shelters, but if I can't find work, I'll be forced to stay here all my life.
Experts believe meaningful change will take a huge concerted effort. It could include setting up rehab centers, cracking down on drug dealers, and providing employment to many who are looking for a way out. Government official Bipin Rai admits more needs to be done.
Various departments of the Delhi government will have to come together to solve this problem. The Ministry of Family and Welfare has a big role to play. They can work on issues like rehabilitation and family planning. And we're working on a cross-departmental framework. Hopefully, we will have a solid plan soon.
Signs that this could work are already being seen at a homeless shelter in Delhi that houses some 600 people.
If I hadn't found this place, I'd have frozen out in the cold.
Mayur Nindrojia is one of the thousands who've migrated to Delhi in search of a brighter future. He was barely surviving on railway platform when a passerby informed him about a homeless shelter right next to the train station. He hopes this support could make all the difference in his life.
I have a bed to sleep on, I have 3 meals a day, I can now go out and look for work without having to worry about the basic necessities.
Authorities say they are working on a plan to eradicate homelessness in Delhi. It won't be easy. But it may well mean the difference between life and death for the masses who are currently left out in the cold. Ishan Garg for CBC News, New Delhi.
You're listening to The World This Weekend on CBC Radio. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. As COVID-19 restrictions have lifted, it's back to business as usual for most clothing retailers, giving consumers the chance to try on new duds in real life before buying. But two of Canada's largest thrift store chains have opted to keep their change rooms closed. Sophia Harris tells us why that's not working for some budget shoppers.
Just a quick message to Value Village. If you could please reinstall the change rooms.
It's trending on TikTok. Value Village shoppers lamenting the loss of the thrift store chain's fitting rooms.
So you're telling me there's no try-on places?
Instead of reopening its change rooms, Value Village has removed them from its 150 locations across Canada. The Salvation Army has also nixed fitting rooms from its 98 thrift stores.
Mostly because, it's kind of just a big inconvenience for people.
Outside of Value Village in Vancouver, some shoppers vented their frustration.
It can get sketchy in there. I've seen guys take their pants off to try on jeans. It's I really miss the change rooms.
You can't guarantee it's going to fit when you buy it.
Both the Salvation Army and Value Village offer exchange only. So if an item doesn't fit,
they don't give you your money back. So you have to exchange it for something. I don't like that policy.
It's not fair.
Anti-poverty activist Tanya Matson lives in New Westminster, BC. She says the absence of change rooms could wind up costing shoppers already on a tight budget.
They're saying, okay, if it doesn't fit, whatever, return it, we'll give you store credit. But for some people, it's not convenient and they don't bother going back.
The Salvation Army, a non-profit, told CBC News it closed its fitting rooms to make room for more merchandise and to address staffing shortages and increase theft. Value Village, a for-profit company, also said it made the move to offer more merchandise and to focus on safety and cleanliness. But secondhand shoppers can still disrobe in private at Goodwill. The nonprofit thrift store chain reopened its change rooms this past July with beefed-up cleaning protocols.
I really like this sweater, I think.
At a Goodwill in Mississauga, Ontario, shopper Neela Varjevska welcomed the opportunity to try on clothes.
We were surprised that they have actually opened changing rooms.
Goodwill Regional Manager Rainer Voigt says the move makes good business sense.
We feel that not allowing customers to try on clothing and then having to come back is more of an inconvenience to our customers than anything else.
The Salvation Army and Value Village say they've made concessions by allowing customers 2 weeks to exchange unwanted items and by adding more mirrors in stores. Sophia Harris, CBC News, Vancouver.
A British publisher is facing some blowback for its efforts to update the works of Roald Dahl. Puffin Books, working with the Dahl estate, is removing several words and phrases from the author's books it deems offensive. For example, Augustus Gloop in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory will no longer be described as enormously fat, but just enormous. The word ugly is also being cut. The effort at making the books more inclusive has drawn praise, but some authors, including Salman Rushdie, have called it censorship, while American writer Joyce Carol Oates suggests it's an effort to continually make money off Dahl's brand while brushing aside his anti-Semitism. Forget the music of the night. Andrew Lloyd Webber's working on the music of the coronation. King Charles' coronation in May, to be precise. It'll feature 12 newly commissioned pieces of music, including an anthem by Sir Andrew. But the musical theater master wasn't the king's only choice.
Darling, you look perfect tonight.
Ed Sheeran was reportedly high on the wish list of performers, but he's playing a show in Texas the day before, so he had to turn it down.
Hello, how are you?
Adele was also reportedly in the running, but she also turned it down. She's not playing in Texas the day before, and her reasons aren't totally clear.
Never mind, I'll find someone like you.
And never mind not having two of the biggest British superstars, there is more than enough to make the coronation a beautiful memory on a low in the moon. A Aside from Andrew Lloyd Webber, the Westminster Abbey ceremony will feature a gospel choir and Greek Orthodox music in honor of the late Prince Philip. There will be thousands of events across the UK, and hundreds of millions are expected to watch worldwide. So as the song from Jesus Christ Superstar goes, although we still don't know if Harry and Meghan will show up. You've been listening to The World This Weekend. I'm Stephanie Skandaris. Good night.